Okay. Today we are going to deal with DTP first. Data transfer process. Okay. And we have different types of DTPs. We have 4 types of DTPs. One is standard DTP. Next one is error DTP. Then we have direct access DTP. Then we have RDA DTP. RDA stands for real time data acquisition DTP. And for today we are concentrating on standard DTP. We will deal with other DTPs later, but for now, whenever you've been loading your master data attributes or text or your cube, we are using DTPs, right? That DTP was only standard DTPs. Till now we just been creating only standard DTP. So we'll just try to see all the properties of it. Then later we will get on to error DTP, then direct access DTP and RDA DTP. Okay, so now the focus is on standard DTPs. Now what's the purpose of standard DTP? You've been loading it to cube or master database. For what reason have you been using this standard DTP? To load data from where? Yeah. In the case what we have seen while loading it to cube, we have used standard DTP to extract data from data source and load into target, which was cube. Same way while loading in master data attributes, then we still use DTP to extract data from data source and load into what? Attribute table. Same way text table we use, right? So if you consider this, if you look at standard DTP, it can extract data from source object and load into target object. It need not be always a data source to cube. If you look at a scenario where you're loading from cube 1 to cube 2, again I will be still using DTP. So in this case, DTP will extract data from cube 1 and load into what? Cube. So basically a standard DTP can extract data from one source object and load into another target object. Okay. And the concept of standard DTP was new in BA7. We never had this in 3.x data flow, because in 3.x we were using info package to load from source to directly to target bus. But in BA7 the DTP is new, where info package was limited to extract from source to data source, and to pick from data source to target we are using standard DTPs. Okay, so it can extract data from one source object and load into what? Target object. And target object could be anything, cube or DSO or master data, or it could be open up destination, whatever it is. And source could be anything. Source could be data source, cube, DSO, info set, any object could be a source. Any object within BW could be source, or any object could be a target. So now if I say, can I use my cube as my source? Can I use cube as my target? So in a scenario where you're loading from cube to cube, would you be using standard DTP? Yes. But in the present scenario, we are looking at using standard DTP to load from data source to target. Okay. So how do you create DTP? Let's say I have a data source connected to my cube with the help of transformations. Now I have created info package, it was extracted, loaded into my data source. Now to load from data source to cube, I would like to use standard DTPs. How do I create? In the context menu of the cube, I can say create standard DTP. Okay. Or when I right click on the data source, I can say create DTP. Okay. Or I can right click on my DTP folder also, data transfer folder also. Okay. Now look at this. Now for example, if I go to my cube, say this is my flow. I've got data source, cube, transformations, DTPs here. I can right click on the DTP folder, say create DTP, or I right click on the cube, I have option of creating DTP, or I right click on the data source, I have option of creating DTP. Either way. So in the context menu of the source object, or in the context menu of the target object, or in the respective DTP folder, in the context menu I can say create new DTP. Okay. Next, whenever you look at DTP, DTP, if you look at DTP, it will always have the properties configured into three different tabs. One is extraction, update, and execute. When you look at DTP, it will have property. It will have the DTP. So if you look at DTP, the properties of DTP would be configured into three different tabs. One is extraction, update, and execute. Okay. Extraction tab will have the properties more of on the source object from where it has to extract the data. Update tab will have properties more on the target object to where it has to update the data. And execute tab will have all the properties about controlling the execution process of the DTP. So extraction tab on the source object, update tab on the target object, execute tab on the execution process of the DTP. Clear? Okay. Now let's look at this. Now this is how it will be. Now let's get into extraction tab now. You don't see that, right? In the extraction tab, first property you have is what? What is data? See, when you write a word data space source, it is normal English, knowing about what's my source of data. But when I say data without space and say source, it is actually referring to BW component of data source. Now when I say data source here, it could be anything. In a scenario where you're loading from cube to cube, you will see cube itself as what? Source. In a scenario where you're loading from data source to cube, you will see what? Data source as your source. So basically, the extraction tab, the first property will tell you what is my source of DTP from where it has to extract the data. If I see, now this time, this way, I have data source connected to my cube. So I am using this DTP to load from data source to cube. So when I go into my data source, the extraction tab will have the property. What is here? Data source property. What is the source of DTP? Data source is what? Data source could be what? Cube, anything, all from any object where it can load from. But in this case, what is my source? Data source. And when I said data source, which data source is it? AW sales underscore tran. And always data source is specific to what? Source system. So this is the data source of this source system and source. ఈ DTPకి ఏ సోర్స్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ నుంచి ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్ చేయాలి ఆ సోర్స్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ పేరు అదన్నమాట. ఓకే బస్. I'll come to this mode. Now then there is what is button here? Filter. This is similar to your data selections of your info package. By using data selections of the info package, we are filtering out data when it is extracted from source system flat file to data source. But when I have a requirement to filter out the data when it is loaded from data source to target, then I would use this filter. Okay. This enable chain is loading jarigindi kabatti. So for example, now there is a button here. Now if I click this, it will ask me all. Say now, if I say geography key is 100, then what happens? It extracts only those records where my geography key is. But this filter plays when it is extracted from the file or when it is loading from data source to cube. Data source to cube. Okay, boss. Similar to your dynamic selections in the info package, here also I can go about writing my routines also. Just click on this. So does it still take me to code something like this? Same L underscore T underscore range, you remember? We can still implement your selection, dynamic selections in DTP also. Like how you written the dynamic selections in info package, we can still write dynamic selections in the DTP also by using routine. Okay. So this is about filter. That's how you maintain the filtering of data. One second. I'm just deleting all the data in the queue. Yeah. Because if I don't delete, it doesn't allow me to keep changing it. Now it allows. Now there is a next. You understand about filter? Yeah, everyone is clear. Good. Now let's say then the important property called extraction mode. See, if you look at info package, it has got init, delta, and full. But when it comes to DTP, you will see only full or delta. Only two extraction modes. Okay. and first delta itself is considered as init. First delta init ante what did I tell you? It brings all the same like full and enables you to run delta. So ఇక్కడ init అనేది ఉండదు, DTP infobal ఉంటుంది, DTP వరకు init లేదు, ఫస్ట్ డెల్టాని init అని అంటారు. ఓకే బస్. నౌ very very important, full and delta bus. When you say extract mode as full, what will happen? When you say extract mode as full, your DTP will extract all the records from your source object. Nothing but in this case it is data source, and loads to target with respect to filters what you specify. If you don't specify any filter, obviously you would take all the records. If you specify filter, it extracts data only which are satisfying your filter. It does not consider which request what it is. Okay. It extracts every data from the data source with respect to selections what you give in the filter block. Okay, was fine. Did you understand full? Is it not same like info package only? Yeah, good. Okay, now point is, if I say delta, how does my delta work? That's the point. Okay, practically I'll show you, then I'll give you theory on what it is. Okay, now let me activate DTP. I've set with what now? Delta. Consider it. Then I'll explain you how it works out. I'm deleting all the requests in my data source. Now my cube is blank, my data source is blank. Okay, what I'll do, and let me just run the info. Does it bring all the data? Okay, done. Fine. See, I'm not worried about the content, I'm only worried about the records. Okay, now I think there seems to be a breakpoint in this. But I don't want this. Okay, I don't want the routine to run. Okay, good. Now if I've run my info pass twice, so how many data sources I see here? How many requests I see here? Remember the numbers 252 and 253, and look at the color here, something red. Yeah, I'll tell you what does it mean. Now I'm running my DTP with what extraction mode? Delta. So first delta is considered as init. Init means what? It should bring a full. So it should bring how many records it is brought in? 2 and 20. If it's totally 22, if you see this, here it tells you selection. What is this? Request ID 252 and what? What is this? 253. Ante you remember data source had the request numbers 252 and 253. When you run, it has extracted all the records from data source where my request ID is 252 and 253. So first delta is like init. So it's brought in all the records of this data source? Yes. Now it became something like, what is this? Green IP. I'll tell you what does it. Okay, boss. Again I'm running my info package. Do I see new request now? 255. Now let me run the DTP delta. How many records it has brought it? 20. You look at the selection. Selection where request ID is what? Getting what I'm trying to do. And now if I go to this, again now 255 is set to green already. Now again I'm running. Still concentrate, focus. Again 257. Yeah. Again I run the DTP. It is extracting records of which request? 257. So now can I say when you run your DTP with the delta extraction mode as delta, the delta mechanism works based on the request number. English lo chepte artham kada, practical chesi cheppina. when you schedule the DTP with delta, it actually runs the delta mechanism based on the request number. So based on the request number, it identifies which is new record, which is old record. When I do a delta from data source to cube or data source to target, DTP has to identify only those records which have not been loaded. How it understands which record is loaded, which is not loaded? Based on the request status. Getting what I am saying? I am just cleaning all the data in the queue. I am deleting all the data. Okay, now let me run the info package. What is the request now? 259. Now I have a request 259 with what is this? This is that red state is called as data mart status. Data mart ante ee request paina cube poyinda poleda cheppadam annadu. If you see, it is red, right? It says, what does it say? Request not updated in any target with what? With the delta. Now if you click this, ఏం కనపడొచ్చు అసలు పోలేదు, ఒకటే రిక్వెస్ట్, ఇట్ జస్ట్ షోస్ ద రిక్వెస్ట్. సో దట్ ఈస్ కాల్డ్ as data mart status, which indicates that this request is not yet been loaded to any target yet. ఎప్పుడైతే when I run my DTP, now what is the extraction mode here? Delta. When I run this DTP, it goes to the data source, finds out those requests for which there is no data mart status. It goes to the data source, picks up data of the request for which there is no data mart status, for which there is no status maintained, and red status. And now what is the request number? We have 259. So so there is only one request which has got data mart status not loaded, so it has to pick up that data. Now what is the request number form now? What is this request? This is the request in the cube. Cube lo what is the request number? 260. Now so the request 259 in the data source is loaded into the cube as what? As 260. I will show you the link now. If I go now, do you still see it as red here? Green. Green meaning request updated in target. Which target? If I just click this various list, request 259 in data source AW sales tran is loaded to cube, the AW sales demo cube as what? అది డేటా సోర్స్లో ఉన్న రిక్వెస్ట్, ఏ రిక్వెస్ట్ ఎక్కడ ఏ క్యూబ్లో పోయింది మొత్తం లింక్ మెయింటైన్ చేసుకుంటుంది. డిడ్ యు అండర్స్టాండ్ దిస్? సో బేస్డ్ ఆన్ ది రిక్వెస్ట్ వైజ్ డేటా మార్ట్ స్టేటస్ డెల్టా వర్క్స్ ఇన్. ఓకే, నౌ వాట్ ఐఎమ్ డూయింగ్, అగైన్ ఐఎమ్ రన్నింగ్ ఎ రిక్వెస్ట్ info package. Now if you go to my data source, now again you see not loaded. So again if I run DTP, now what happens now? Even though there are two requests, 259 and 261, does it pick up data of 259 or 261 or both? Etla or data mart status. So based on the data mart status, it identifies which request is already loaded, which is not loaded. Based on it picks up data. So that is how. దాన్ని ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఏం చెప్తానంటే, ఇంత డెప్త్ చెప్పేవాడు క్వశ్చన్ అడిగితే హౌ డస్ డెల్టా మెకానిజం వర్క్ అంటే బేస్డ్ ఆన్ ద రిక్వెస్ట్ అంటాడు. బేస్డ్ ఆన్ ద రిక్వెస్ట్ అంటే లాజిక్ ఇది కాన్సెప్ట్. ఓకేనా బస్? ఇంకో పాయింట్ చెప్పాలి చూడండి. అగైన్ ఐమ్ రన్నింగ్ డెల్టా. ఇట్ పిక్స్ అప్ డేటా ఆఫ్ 261. సీక్వెన్స్ నెంబర్ విల్ బి కమింగ్ ఫర్ ఎవ్రీ రిక్వెస్ట్. 262 is loaded. ఇప్పుడు now loaded. If you see, data mart status updated as what? 262. ఇప్పుడు నేను see what I'm trying to do now. The request 261 was loaded to the queue as what? 262 was. Now what I'm doing is, for some reason the request 262 which is there in the queue is wrong. Okay, I feel it's something wrong, so I'm deleting that request. Chudu bas. I had a request 261 in my data source. When it was not loaded to cube, it was saying it was not uploaded to any target. Data mart status was red, and I loaded it. I've just deleted the loaded request in my queue. Should it reset the status back or not? That's my question. First, a new request has come into my data source as 261, and data mart status was not loaded. Then I've triggered the DTP. The request 261 which is in the data source is loaded to my cube as what? 262. So then when I go to data source, it has maintained the data mart status as 262. Now I feel the data what is coming to my queue as 262 is wrong. when I delete this request 262, will it reset the status back or not? That's the point. Cube lo 262 request delete cheste data source lo 261 status malli back poledani pettukuntuda pettukoda ane point. I have deleted this request. Neevu cheppu pettukunte manchida pettukopothe manchidi. Should it reset it or no? Ye chesinda reset chesinda. Since it has done the resetting, if I run the DTP again, will it again pick data of 261 now? Yes, that is a benefit. So it has to reset first. If it doesn't reset, let's say I delete the request 261 again. I'm not going to miss those records of 261. Reset cheyavote 261 records miss aithe. So as soon as I delete my request to the cube, it will reset the data mart status back. So that when you trigger the delta load again, the request is brought in back to the target. Whatever I have discussed now, it is for pure delta mechanism. When the extraction mode is what? Delta. Is everyone clear? So again cleaned it up, okay. So I'm going to run my info package again. Okay? Again I've got what is this? 264. Now I'm going to show next mechanism here. Within delta there are some check boxes here. Within delta there are some check boxes here. Now look at this. What is check box here? Only get delta once. Now I'll make you understand about this meaning. If I check, you see it is delta with extra functionality is what? Only get delta once. Now what does this mean? I'll tell you. Do I have a new request in the data source now? 264. Is it loaded to my cube? No. So what I would do is I would run the DTP. Now I'm running DTP with what? Delta with extra option is what? Get delta once. Okay. So get delta only once. I'll tell you what does it mean. Loaded bus. What was the request there in the cube? 260. What is it? 265. Now if I go to my cube, 264 was loaded as 265 into the cube. Clear? Done. Good. I am running info package again. So does it form a new request in my data source? 266 also. Good. Okay, boss. Now I'm going to run my DTP. If I run my DTP again, what happens? Again it takes what? You know normal delta, right? 266 comes in. Okay. Confused them. 264, 266 undana. If I run my DTP, what happens? Again 266 comes in. Right? So now. But before I'm loading 266, what I'm trying to do is the request what has come in with 265 is wrong. So I would like to delete this request. ఇప్పుడు రిక్వెస్ట్ డిలీట్ అయితే ఏం కావాలా? ఆటోమేటిక్ డేటా సోర్స్లో డేటా మార్ట్ స్టేటస్ బ్యాక్ వెళ్ళాలా? వెళ్ళిపోయింది బ్యాక్. డజంట్ హ్యావ్ ఎనీ లింక్. బ్యాక్ వెళ్ళిపోయింది కదా, రైట్? సిన్స్ నౌ ఇఫ్ యు సీ as soon as I deleted this request 265 in the queue, it has reset the data mart status of 264 back as not loaded here. So now if I'm going to run now how many requests do you see in the data source now? 264 and 266 both have a data mart status as not loaded here. If I run the DTP now, how many requests will it bring? Will it bring data of request 264 and 266 or only 266? What is delta? Since I've deleted, it has reset the data mart status back, right? So when the data mart status is reset back, when I do delta again, it has to pick records of what? 264 and 266. That is what normal delta should work. But since you have enabled the checkbox only get delta once, whether the request data mart status is updated or not updated, it will be processed only once in the delta. Since request 264 was already processed in the previous delta, it will not get processed again. So 264 ki 266 రెండింటికి డేటా మార్ట్ స్టేటస్ లేకున్నా 264 ఆల్రెడీ పోయిన డెల్టాలో ప్రాసెస్ అయిపోయింది కాబట్టి మళ్ళీ ప్రాసెస్ కాదన్నమాట. So it is picking data of what? That is get delta 1 source. Clear? Okay. See, did I run this info bag almost for 5 to 6 times I've run. So each time we run, does it form with request? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 268, 69, 70, 71, 70. These are the 6 requests I've got in my data source. Okay. I'm deselecting this. I'm just like normal delta now. So if you run this normal delta, does it pick up data of all the 6 requests? 268, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, all the 6 requests. And data of all the 6 requests are loaded as single request in the queue? Yes or no? Sure. I know each request had 20 records, so 6 requests ante. What is the message? So I'm just running normal delta now here. So it has to pick up data of what? 268, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. So that's why 6 packets, but look at this. If you click on this selection, it is picking data of 68, 69, 70, 71, all the 6. And all the 6 requests data is loaded as what? 275 into a queue. With all those 120 records. Yes or no? Okay? That's like normal delta. But for me, let's say in the real time I have a problem like this. I've got 6 requests, okay? But each request has got say 10 million records in it. So I've got 6 requests like this, each one containing 10 million in it. So if I just trigger a DTP, it has load those 6 and almost 6 crore records into one request. And when you load such a huge data, sometimes it tends to fail out saying huge amount of data. So then in that case, what I want is, I don't combine all of them into single request. Let's say there are 6 requests. Let it load as a 6 request itself. So then what I'll do, I'll say load request by request, I would say. That's how do I do this option. See now, how do I do this? I just deleted it back, yeah, and I still have the 6 requests, okay. If I load delta again, the 6 requests will come. Yes, why? Because I have not processed them with get delta once, yeah. So I'll say change. But look at this, get all new data request by request. And go next until no more request new data ante very request lenadurku anni request teesukona. Okay, I'm not done. If you do it, I'll not go to monitor here. I'll just go to queue manage and keep refreshing. So, do you understand this, boss?